Hey, free timers. What if I told you you don't need millions in the bank to finally be free? That's the story we've all been sold, and it's flat out wrong. In this episode, I'll show you the different path to freedom that almost nobody talks about. Let's get on with the show.
Welcome back to the Time Freedom Podcast, where you can learn how to rethink your work and your money to create a life you love right now. Join us for insights to help you find meaningful freedom so you can choose how and when and with whom you work for as long as you want. Here are your hosts, me, Brian Herriot, and Kirby Denison. All right, and welcome back to the fourth episode of the Time Freedom Podcast. Our topic today is Don't Climb the Savings Mountain to Retirement. Provocative title. Let me first introduce my co-host. That is Kirby Denison, and Kirby is a fractional COO and a business coach and owner of Kirby & Co. What have you been up to lately, Kirby?
Yes. So we are finally back in school. So it's been almost peaceful. We've got one more that will start on Tuesday, I guess. So we're counting down the days.
Some of them are back, not quite all of them. Cool.
Yes, we're ready. One was crying because she didn't get to start at the same time as the oldest, Skylar. And I said, remind me in 5 years when you're complaining that you have to start school. So she's more than ready.
Awesome.
So yeah, how's your last week been?
Good. So my update kind of related to all of this good time freedom stuff is that I was just out in Pennsylvania / New Jersey, right on the border, New Hope, Pennsylvania, and had a really cool 2-day experience with 14 other people that I have been in a speech writing and performing workshop with. And our purpose, so we've been doing this for several months, but our trip out there this time was to put together our speaker reels. And so they had all the videos running and everything, and we had to deliver our speeches, and then they recorded them. And then in 90 days or something like that, we'll be able to get our reels back, which is just another way for meeting planners to see what you're like on stage as you do more keynotes. But one thing I realized is that I have never worn makeup before because they put makeup on you for recording it, and it felt so weird. Like it was heavy, and I felt it continually, and I'm not used to that. So that may not sound weird to some people that are listening, but I thought that was really interesting. As soon as I was done, I wiped it off.
Yeah. Well, and stage makeup is like so much more than normal makeup. I feel like just so that they can get because of the
True.
bright lights and all of those things. So, but as a male, I am sure that was absolutely weird. So
It was, nothing against people that wear makeup. It was just new. So, I've actually heard as you speak, you should wear some sort of whatever base, or I'm not sure what it's called, because it helps with, to keep you from looking so greasy. Anyway.
And today I am with Brian, and he is our author and financial advisor and all things time freedom. And so, Brian, what are we going to discuss today?
Yes. So today we're going to talk about building a giant nest egg and why. If you have one, great. And if you want to keep building one, great. But there's always a lot of talk about the fact that nobody has saved enough for retirement. And I actually propose, along the lines of through the time freedom lens, a different way to look at how you could successfully live out your years without building that giant nest egg. And so that is our topic for today. But I will start it with a story. Not so much a story, maybe an anecdote. But so lately, I've been watching a lot of baseball, and I'm very loyal to my local teams. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet. But the team that I follow, a team that's very hard to follow because they never win, is the Milwaukee Brewers. However, somehow this year, they are really, really good. They just had a 14-game win streak. And what that actually means is when there was like an old promotion from this local burger place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that if the Brewers ever win 12 games in a row, the entire city gets free burgers. And they did. And yesterday was the day that the city of Milwaukee got free cheeseburgers, which is crazy. But the reason I bring up this story is because it was the Brewers are finally doing well. And it's unfortunate because the longtime announcer of the Milwaukee Brewers is a gentleman by the name of Bob Uecker. And Bob Uecker passed away last year. I think he was 90. And he had been the announcer for the Brewers since 5 years before I was even born. And people may be familiar with Bob Uecker because he was on that old 80s sitcom, Mr. Belvedere. I don't know if you've seen that or if you've ever seen those Milwaukee Light or Miller Light commercials from the 80s and 90s. Must be in the front row, that one. Anyway, Bob Uecker is someone that I highlight in the book as somebody who, started as a big league player, but was, as he self-describes himself, terrible at it. And he found his second career as an announcer. And as an announcer, he ended up then doing that for, I don't know, whatever 25 minus 1971 is, almost 50 years or so, maybe more than 50 years. And he worked and loved that job, and it kept him around the people that he loved. And he did that all the way into his 90s. And I think, he slowed down in the last few years. He called just, home games, and he called just one of the home game series, but he was continued to be around it. And I think that that is an incredible model for people to think about who have the luxury of work that they can do to craft that they absolutely love. Because if you have work like that, why not do it forever? Right? I mean, yeah, so I just wanted to share that story. I didn't know if anything is interesting, or you may have heard that as reading an early version of the book, but
Yeah. And it's funny though that you say that the Brewers are the worst because the Rockies are definitely
this
worse.
year.
The Rockies have been horrible, and you still cannot get cheap tickets to go. They are so expensive. Like, I don't know if it's just the atmosphere. Like, for me, every time we go to a Rockies game, it's like watching the sunset behind the stadium and stuff like that. But yeah, the Brewers can't be worse than
Yeah,
them.
this year, absolutely, the Rockies are worse. Another reason I like my Bob Uecker is because he really reminds me of my grandfather. And my grandfather died several years ago. He was 93, and he owned his own plumbing and heating company in a small town in Fredonia, Wisconsin. And he also ended up getting work much later into life. He worked at like the equivalent of the local Ace Hardware, and he just loved to chat people up. And he did that for years and years because he told me once he did actually not work for a while. I think because my grandmother made him not work. But he said, Brian, I'm so bored that I've started rotating the wheels on the vacuum cleaner. And to give you a sense for how bored he was. And so he did that as well. But I think that these stories really stuck with me as I wrote this chapter in the book, chapter number 4. And I ended up doing some research on it to find out. And, there's a lot of numbers out there from different research, and studies that show about how people are working later and later. And they're doing it for financial reasons, but also for social reasons. And that, your work can give you a sense of status, and people want to keep those things. I think the one stat that I saw that I quoted in the book is a 2023 report by Pew Research. It said 19% of adults age 65 and older are currently employed. And the interesting thing is in 1987, actually, that was back when 82 was when the Brewers went to the World Series and lost. But back in 87, it was 11%. So people are trending working later. And I feel, if that's going to be the case, let's get started early, figuring out a way to make that work, incredible work, so that you can work it later.
Yeah, and the one thing that I remember when we were doing research for your book is like the number of, I think the term was like unretirees, like those that did retire and then also came back, was astounding. I mean, it was such a big number of people that were coming back for that purpose and that sense. And I know previously I worked in a nursing home, and that's what they live for, is like having a purpose and everything, once they get older. And I even remember that like with my grandparents, because when I worked in the nursing home, it was funny. they live for bingo was always the joke. They live for bingo. And like, then my grandparents were old enough, they went into a retirement home and it was kind of the same thing. So I do think that being able to work longer and having that purpose and that connection and that passion also relates into some longevity too, because you are just happier and naturally that way. So if we were to have a magic number and, for retirement, I guess, like, what should that be? Is there one at all? And what do you think?
Yeah. One quick comment first about working forever, right? Because it's really what I'm kind of saying is, don't retire, work forever, just pull
Mhm.
back. Sometimes we can't physically or mentally. It's easy for me to say at 49 and a half years old, oh, yeah, I'll be able to do it forever. And I want to acknowledge the fact that, some can't. And that's certainly okay. And that's why you do save. So that then leads to the question that you said is, that you asked, which is how much should you save? And this this is hotly debated. And obviously it depends upon how much you need to live from, right? And so the the best scenario that I've ever heard where this was debated was on a podcast. I think it was back from 2018 or something like that.
Mhm.
Was the Paula Pant. She's in the fire community. She has a great podcast called Afford Anything, which is afford anything, not everything. And she had on a very famous personal finance expert, Susie Orman, which people are probably familiar with.
Mhm.
And Paula asked Susie what she thought of the fire movement. And, usually when you're on podcasts, it's a lot of like, yes, yes, agreed, 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 kind of like our back and forth. But when Paula asked Susie what she thought of fire, Susie went, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And this was a fire podcast. And the reason why is that they got into this discussion about the fact that in the early stages of fire, in the early movement, like back in 2018, it's kind of evolved since then, but people would say that you could early retire on $1 million. And if you use the 4% rule, which we talked about a little bit in a previous episode, that means that you can live on 4% of $1 million every year and survive kind of forever. And that's $40,000, which Susie said is unrealistic, right? It seems pretty low unless you are, a huge money minimizer. Again,
Mhm.
referring back to another episode, a previous episode. And so, Susie was saying you need 5, 6, maybe 10 million. And so, when you get up to 5 million, the 4% rule says you're living on $200,000 a year. I don't know if people need that either. So I would say, like, if somebody were to ask me how much should I have, I don't know. I'd say between 1 and 5 probably will satisfy most people. However, the question that I really pose is there really a right number anyway?
Mhm.
And the 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 reason I say that is it can be very discouraging. Like, I think you can leverage what you've saved and you should continue to save, but we shouldn't get so fixated on the number. Because let's say you are at 1 million and you feel that you need 4 million. It will take a long time. I mean, regardless of how the stock markets go and how much you can
Mhm.
save, it's going to take you a long time. And in the book, I break down how long it'll take. But let's just for all intents and purposes say it could take you another 20 years, right? If you didn't save anything more and you just let your money grow, that's like, you know, 20 years to grow that is just, and you're waiting around to live a freer life. What I think about instead is what if instead of pursuing that number, pursue what that number would give you. So if you have 1 million and you're trying to get to 4 million, you need to come up with an additional 3 million. Sorry, I hope the numbers aren't getting too confusing here, but if you use the 4% rule on $3 million, you're talking about $120,000 a year.
Mhm.
Did I do that right? Yeah, I think so. $120,000 a year. So instead of waiting for 20 years and trying to wait until that extra 3 million grows, how could you go out and get $120,000 a year in the most flexible, passive manner. And now I'm not going to look across the screen here from you and say, you could do that tomorrow. Some people probably could. I couldn't. It may take you some time to, continue to work, how the flexibility angle and all of those sorts of things. However, it's possible. And I'll argue it's possible in 3 years. And so, that's where, I think the best, most optimal, most free lifestyle has this combination of some amount in savings that you're using, but that also then you stop fixating on that number. Of course, grow it if you can, but instead focus on how you can develop this recurring income instead more quickly and do it with as little work as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, the 3 years is so realistic. As a new business owner, especially, like, yes, it takes time to get going and things like that. And as you continue to grow, depending on what your niche is or like what you're offering, it is very doable. One of the things that we have talked about a lot too is like finding our one thing, which we'll get to in later episodes. But really, when you find that one thing, then you can tailor it around exactly what you're saying. Like, what time freedom, like, where do you want to be spending your time? How much time do you want to be doing work and those types of things? So I think it is very realistic in the 3 years, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And let me just talk a little bit more about that, reaching that number, right? Because well, first of all, we all feel bad about ourselves because we're not there, or it's going to take us forever to get there. But I have this framework that I describe in the book. It's called like the savings mountain versus the cash river. And I won't go into it here, but there's many reasons why I'm not a big mountain person. And as you all know, I'm definitely more about the water, but there's a little teaser. However, think about this journey that you have towards this saving goal and then using those savings as going up and down a mountain. There's kind of 3 points along the way that are all very challenging. So think on the way up is that you are, deferring spending in order to save. The more you save, the more you defer / sacrifice. So you're sacrificing what you can do now for later. Not necessarily bad, but it's a fact. But then the problem is where do you get to the top, right? So the same question, what's the number? Because what if you think, oh, the number's 4 million, and then you're almost there, and then you're like, oh gosh, I should really bump that up a little bit more. I should work another couple years. So you're like never really sure where the top is, and you're always feeling bad about it. They call it the 1 more year syndrome, right? And if anyone has parents or people are close to retirement, they're like, well, if I work just 1 more year, just 1 more year. I know that is the case in my family. And then the moment you stop working completely, against kind of what we've been advocating for here, you are now pulling money out, right, of your savings and living off it. However, what happens if right after that happens, the market starts to go down? You're pulling money out of the market as it's going down. It's kind of like a double whammy. You're reducing it because you're pulling money out, and you're losing money on the way down as well. Like all of a sudden you're like, is this going to last me? So on the way up, you're sacrificing. You're never sure you're at the top, and then you're worried on the way down because you have no control. Again, there's ways to help mitigate some of the risk around these things. And I hope nobody sends bad emails saying that I advise not saving. I absolutely do. I just think it doesn't have to be as much as you think it does, as long as you pair it with this flexible work concept.
Yeah. And I think that all the way up to this point in the whole foundation of the time freedom formula, is the lifestyle expenses, your income, and your flexible work. So you have to have all 3 of those when you're considering this to be able to make sure you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. And here's another, if you this hit me one time, and when I've shared it with people, they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So I wanted to share it here with everybody. And that is the idea of how could working forever actually feel more freeing than, pursuing kind of an early retirement or early financial freedom. So in other words, I'm saying by working forever, it's actually more freeing. I think that actually can be the case because let me describe the scenario of somebody that's trying to perhaps retire early or achieve financial freedom. They have an opportunity put in front of them to take a 1-month break, 2-month break, 3-month break, and go on a trip to the Andes Mountains or whatever. You're going to be like, oh gosh, I can't do that because I'm going to get behind on my savings so that I can achieve that ultimate freedom later. And you're suddenly like trapped in your job and trapped in your savings plan. Whereas if you're like, you know what, I'm going to work much longer, much later in life, I may pull back, go up on hours, go down on money, up on money, whatever the case. I have that kind of release valve later in life. I would love to take a year off. And all of a sudden that 1 year, that 1, 2, 3 month turns into 1 year and you're like, this is pretty nice. It's pretty freeing. And by the end of the year, I'm feeling like I need to do something again. And you kind of head back to work and you're like, so what? So I tack 1 more year onto the end or 2 more half-time years onto the end. As long as that work is great, wonderful. And I guess an underlying assumption that I have in all of this is that you love your job or you can create a job that you do love. Take that with, factor that into there. But yeah, I really do believe that there's this kind of weird scenario where by working longer, it's actually more freeing.
Yeah, and it goes back to the statistic you shared at the beginning of how many people are working longer. And I think it does go back to even in one of the previous episodes you shared, like the smile curve and just being able to do those fun things and incorporate them now. And that's one thing I talk to my clients even is, I had one person come to me and say, like, they have all these deadlines and all these things to do, and yet they don't get to do like fun things anymore. And so they were almost getting resentful towards their work. And, it's how can you not only your work that you're doing, but also like how you're scheduling your day to day or the time off that we talked about before. And like sprinkling those in so that you do get to like enjoy it now and not like, oh, I can't do that until I'm 60. When it's 60, I might not be able to. Like,
Yeah, or it'll look different. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. You talked about the fun nature of work. Weirdly, long before I've been thinking about time freedom, way, way, way back, I've always kind of had this concept of, I've got my work that I got to do and then I have my fun work. And my fun work, which my wife never understood, what's fun work? That doesn't make any sense. And for a while, it was like doing spreadsheets on Saturday morning, which to some people is like, that's not fun, but I was having fun with it. I can remember earlier in my career when I was managing a couple of people, I talked about this too. And they're like, not everything about your work is going to be something that you love, but the idea is to make more and more and more and more and more of it that way. And if you can't get it in your work, then get it outside of your work until you can move it into your work. Again, this is not a quick fix overnight kind of thing. You got to slowly steer your way, but to even start steering, you need to know where you're going. And that's why that's the idea behind this whole episode is it's not just work and build a big mountain of money. There are other options that people should consider that are totally valid. And the more options, the better. I guess that goes in line with the flexible nature of everything that we talk about.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that came up for me when you were saying that was, it isn't overnight. And even like if you have a 9 to 5 or you're not necessarily an entrepreneur, like you can get that outside of your life. And if you are in a 9 to 5 and looking at entrepreneurship, that's what I did is I had a job and then I knew what I wanted to be doing and I slowly was able to like just add it in and reduce my 9 to 5 like as my business grew. And so it wasn't like I just jumped in like
Right.
was it last week maybe you shared Laura's story where she cashed in her 401k and it's like I didn't do that and I'm still growing and doing the things and every day I'm so excited because I get to say like in my small town I never knew like this life was even possible or the people that I've gotten to work with or the people you've introduced me to. I remember some of the early readers and like the people that were on the call. I'm like, is this my life? Like, this is so fun.
That makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. I mean, it's really awesome, and that's what I want for everybody, right?
Yeah.
If you're in
Yeah.
a full-time drudgery job, like, let's do something about it.
Yeah.
Let's move.
You've got 2 great resources right here.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter where you live. You could live rural, urban, small town, big town,
Mhm.
not even in the US. I mean, that's also awesome too. It's great.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, do you have any closing thoughts for today?
If you're behind in your savings goal, that's okay. That's my parting thought.
Yeah.
We'll do
And
something different.
yeah, exactly. I think that one thing that you've helped me with tremendously too as an entrepreneur, like partnerships and all the things we've talked about is, you know, I've done some of your financial planning work with you personally, and just knowing, and that was one of the call to actions in the book that I remember. It just felt so like relieving almost, and like it is
Mm,
okay. And no matter where you are, you can meet us where we're at and help us still make a plan. Like, just because you're not there doesn't mean you're doomed. Like, there's
I
still
love
hope.
it. Yep. Yep.
So,
That was my intent, and I'm so glad that it came through.
yeah.
So what are we talking about next week?
So next week is the look back, look ahead, and life design, which is one of my favorites.
This is great. This is, we last episode talked about our money personality, which is a little bit of look back. Well, now we're going to kind of build on that and move ahead and think about, where do we want to go in the next 10 years of our life? Because you
Mhm.
kind of need to know where that is before you start to get the money and the work pieces to follow suit. So
Yes,
awesome. Well,
absolutely.
wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Definitely like and subscribe and do on YouTube and give us an honest review on Apple or wherever you're listening. And I guess with that, we'll see you next time.
See you next week.